Hi, I'm Justine, co-founder of Birthpedia. I'm so honored that you chose to join us today. On this podcast, we bring you the most qualified information surrounding all things birth, from preconception to postpartum and newborn care, by bringing the birth professional to you. We do what we do to cut through the noise so that birthing families can feel empowered and knowledgeable as they're making some of the most important decisions of their lives and the life of their new baby to come. Just a reminder that this podcast is for informational purposes only and not meant for medical advice. You can read our full disclaimer at birthpedia.net. So whether you're driving to your next destination, doing all those dishes, or relaxing with some tea, welcome to the conversation. Welcome to the show. It's Birthpedia's first ever podcast. So exciting. And this episode is sponsored by, you guessed it, Birthpedia. Birthpedia is a resource for birthing families to help them prepare for conception, pregnancy, labor and delivery, postpartum, and newborn care. Not only do birth professionals answer your frequently asked questions, but there's a plethora of instructional videos, from fitness videos to breastfeeding videos. There's a toolbox with essential tools like a kit counter, affirmations, meditations, a labor tracker, and so much more. Obviously, we're going to be talking about Birthpedia on the show, but if you want to learn more or to create an account, go to birthpedia.net. You can sign up for a free 5-day trial and download the app on your phone. Or to create an account, you can use the code Birthpedia1. That's Birthpedia with the number 1 for 15% off for listening to the show today. So let's get started. Today, we're going to be talking about Birthpedia, what it is, why it exists, as well as some of the reasons that birthing families face more challenges today than ever before when it comes to where they access their information to prepare for their pregnancy, labor and delivery, and postpartum. Joining me in a little bit are Briana and Mandy that are on the Birthpedia team. But before I introduce them, I want to tell you a little bit more about my background and why my husband and I decided to start Birthpedia. So my appreciation for birth started really as a young girl. I was very fortunate not to grow up hearing fear-based birth stories from my mother or my relatives. And a lot of that was thanks to my grandpa, who was a medical doctor who also owned his own family practice, where he included obstetric care in his family practice for many, many years. I love listening to his birth stories.
A full-term lady came to my office, so I examined her. You better go to the hospital because you're ready to deliver. Wow. Go in your car. Doc, I don't have any car. Somebody brought me in. And she's almost crowning. And so I pulled my secretary, get my bag. And so we pulled her in the car. It's 15 miles away, the hospital. And so halfway going to the hospital, my secretary said to me, Doc, you better stop. Why? There's something going on in the back.
You don't seem
the baby was crowning. So it happened to be we're just in front of a barn, empty. This was at noontime. So we pulled in the barn, parking lot. I said to my secretary, get some towels and call the ambulance. So I delivered that there. And it's all this time she said, Doc, I messed up your car. I'll pay you double. She never paid me.
He was also present at my birth as well as my older sister's birth. And my mom used my grandpa's hypnosis tapes for childbirth. She listened to his cassette tapes to help prepare for her labor and delivery. And I would hear my mom growing up from time to time reference her labors and how she enjoyed them and how much hypnosis helped her in the process. So by the time I was pregnant with my first son, I had already attended a couple hospital births by close friends of mine. And I think, what I experienced, I really thought was normal. This is how you have a baby. And looking back on it now, I realized that some of the things that I witnessed had shaped the view of my birth and the belief that I had of my birth, but actually weren't ideal. So now I'm young and I'm newly pregnant with my first son. And I did what a lot of people do. I hired an OBGYN because my friend hired him. And I thought, well, her experience was okay, so mine should probably be okay. And during my pregnancy, there were a couple things that happened in my prenatal visits that didn't quite sit well with me. But again, I just kind of kept going as this is normal. This is how it is, obviously. And as far as my mentality for labor and birth, I think it was, I'll try to have a natural labor. And if I can't, then I'll just get the epidural type thing. Well, at 34 weeks pregnant, I ended up taking a free childbirth education class that was taught by a doula, and she did a wonderful job. It was in this class that she was talking about the difference between a doctor and a midwife and how to be expected to be treated by either one. And it was then that I realized that I had been mistreated as a patient. But at 34 weeks pregnant, I didn't have many options. But thankfully, the doctor who I chose was in a group, and there were also 3 midwives in that group. So I pretty seamlessly was able to transfer to the midwifery model of care with those 3 midwives. But because it was so late in the game, I knew I was only going to be able to meet them each maybe once before I went into to deliver. After that class, I became even more determined to believe that my body could actually do this. It could give birth naturally, just like my mother did. I remember meeting a mom randomly in the motherhood maternity store, and she had just had her baby and she was nursing her baby. And we got in a conversation, and in this conversation, she was like, "You can do this. Your body knows how to do this. You were made to do this. You have to trust your body." And it really instilled something in me, and it instilled a belief that okay, I can give birth to this baby. I was made to give birth to this baby. So at 34 weeks pregnant, my mentality really shifted. And I started listening to my grandpa's hypnosis tapes, the same ones that my mother listened to. And he even did a couple sessions with me and my husband over the phone to help me prepare for my labor. And at just over 40 weeks, I gave birth to an 8-pound, 6-ounce baby boy, naturally and unmedicated in the hospital with one of those midwives. And for the most part, it was a very respectful and empowering birth experience. Almost 3 years later, when I became pregnant with my second son, I knew right away that I wanted a different birth experience and pregnancy experience. I read different books filled with positive birth stories. I was more careful with where I got my information. Of course, I listened to my grandpa's hypnosis tapes right away, straight from the get-go. I went through a childbirth prep book called Birthing from Within, which was really impactful for me. And probably the biggest change I knew right away was that I wanted to have a home birth with a home birth midwife. And I honestly didn't even know home birth was a thing when I was pregnant with my first son. I found the most wonderful midwives from a local birthing center, and my prenatal care, my birth and postpartum were so night and day different from my first experience. I fell in love with the midwifery model of care, and I also fell in love with this new confidence and belief in myself in the entire process of preparing to bring this little life into the world. At just over 40 weeks, I delivered my 9-pound, 11-ounce baby boy in a birth tub in my bedroom. My experience forever changed me, and I have no doubt that it had every impact on the way that I transitioned into mothering a new addition into the family. When a woman feels empowered and respected and knowledgeable in her pregnancy and birth, she carries that empowerment, respect, and knowledge into her very role as a mother. When my youngest son was 5 months old, I decided to get trained as a childbirth educator. And after my training, all I knew and what I told my midwife was that I wanted to be a powerhouse of resources. I wanted to bring people together and bring resources into one spot as much as I could to help my local community. I started doing birth photography, and my husband actually joined me and did cinematography for some of those births. And one day we were dreaming of how we could work together doing something that we love. He is super passionate about cinematography and telling stories, and I am super passionate about birth. So I said, I'll do birth with you. And so we started dreaming of this resource that we could create together that would bring childbirth education in a new way. Something that was extremely important to me was that it was a place where somebody could go to receive information, whether they were having a home birth, a birth center birth, or hospital birth. Birth is not linear. Sometimes plans change, birth venues change, providers change. And I thought it would be wonderful to have a resource for women no matter what changes in their plan. So that's a little backstory about why we created Birthpedia, a resource at your fingertips where birth professionals answer your questions. Before I get more into the app, I want to introduce you to Brianna. Brianna is a midwife and Birthpedia's content manager, so she plays a key role in making sure that the information that you receive is current and qualified.
Hi, Justine. How are you? I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you're here with us. So why don't we start by you telling our listeners a little bit more about your background and how you came to join the Birthpedia team.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my career as a labor and delivery nurse. And throughout my time in nursing school, I sort of struggled with trying to find my passion and my niche. And then I got to labor and delivery, and it all became super clear to me. Birth is intoxicating, and I just loved supporting women through their labor and their birth. I worked in a busy hospital in Chicago suburbs, and I saw firsthand what the effects of increasing interventions were in childbirth. At my hospital, 1 in 3 moms would end up with a C-section, and I knew there was a better way. So I went back to school, and I became a certified nurse midwife. And I supported women through pregnancy and childbirth in and out of the hospital for many years. Throughout my time, I started my own family, and I'm blessed to have 3 beautiful children. My births gave me so much perspective on the experiences women have throughout childbirth. My births did not go as planned. My first was a vaginal medicated birth, and my second, I was pregnant with twins. So I ended up having a C-section with them. But both times I was well supported by a birth team that honored and respected my wishes and my desires for as natural a birth as possible. And I was well informed and ready for whatever outcome came. But that's not always the case for women. And I saw that a lot in my practice. And so after years of supporting hundreds of women, I took time to be at home with my family. And in that time, I wanted to find a way to help more women feel empowered and informed in their decisions surrounding their pregnancy and birth. Thanks to Birthpedia, I have a new avenue to reach more women. So Birthpedia's mission is so much aligned with my desire to educate, support, and empower women, and as many women as possible during their pregnancy and birth journey. So I just feel so blessed to be a part of Birthpedia.
Well, we are so blessed to have you. We're so excited to have you a part of the team. And it's true that you're not also just a midwife and you work on Birthpedia's team, but you also educate future midwives, right?
Yeah, I have been instructing at University of North Carolina as well as York Technical College for undergraduate nursing students so that they can find the same passion that I did in nursing school for supporting women and childbearing families throughout their birth journey. So I really enjoy sparking the same passion that I have in new nurses.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for sharing. Hang tight. I'm going to bring Mandy on so that everyone can meet her. Mandy is a doula and a childbirth educator, and she's also Birthpedia's birth worker liaison. Hey,
Hello.
Mandy.
Hi. Thank you for having me. It's good to see you too.
Yeah. So please tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you came to join the team.
Yeah. So my foray into birth work didn't begin until I was pregnant myself. And with my first, I didn't really know much and I didn't put a lot of research or thought into it. And so it wasn't until halfway through my pregnancy that I realized, you know what, I need something different if this is going to turn out well for me and for my baby. So I switched gears and ended up in a different environment. And that meant that I had to do a lot of research and really kind of dig my heels in and get prepared. But it turned out to be such a beautiful experience. And with my second and third pregnancies, I actually chose home birth with midwives because I had felt so supported with that model of care when I switched with my first child. And I just loved the friendship that I experienced as a birthing woman from these women that were providing such important care in my community. And so from that point, I kind of decided, you know what? This really matters to me. I want other women to have beautiful, empowering experiences like I've been able to enjoy. And I took my first doula training in 2017, went on to get certified and started my own small business providing doula support to women in the area. And during that time, I also got certified as a hypnobirthing childbirth educator with Hypnobirthing International. Because while I didn't know that I was going to be interested in childbirth as a young girl, I think I realized at an early age that I was kind of born to teach. And I had taught English prior to becoming pregnant. So yeah, childbirth education just felt like a natural decision for me. So I started to incorporate that into the doula support that I was providing, and also getting to meet lots of families that already had doulas or maybe weren't sure that they wanted a doula, but did need that childbirth education. So I really enjoyed just providing that for them, because childbirth education is so important. It really opens your eyes to, like you said, Justine, what your body is capable of. And I remember that light bulb moment when I took my childbirth education class when I was pregnant with my first. And it shifted my whole perspective. It made me realize that I had so many resources within myself to do this, and that the fear I was experiencing wasn't really because I wasn't designed properly. And so starting to process that was so instrumental for me. And so it really became a gift to be able to offer that to other women. And at the beginning of this year, I kind of expanded my birth business a little bit. My business partner and I decided to merge our individual businesses into an LLC. So we started that back in March, and it's been so beautiful to see just the women that have been supporting us in that and allowing us to serve them. And my business partner is really good on social media, and she actually sent me the ad that Birthpedia was looking for a liaison to birth professionals. And I really love networking. I love talking with other birth workers and expanding that community of collaboration. Collaboration is something that's really important to me. And I think that if we're going to see the statistics shift in our country around maternal health and mortality rates, and for infants as well, like collaboration is where it's at. We have to start bringing all of the different birth workers, obstetricians, midwives, doulas, childbirth educators, and everything in between. We have to start bringing them all together to be having these like empowering conversations for the families that are being seen by them. So yeah, I love the vision of Birthpedia. I think trying to put easy to understand educational videos into the hands of birthing families is so important. But as a resource, it's even so much more than that. So that's exciting too, to be a part of something that just has the potential to impact a mom positively at a lot of different levels.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. And what you said about collaboration among providers as well as childbirth education, like it's all really bringing it back to mom-centered care, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Patient-centered care.
Yes.
And putting the power and the informed decision making in the patient's hands again.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, I mean, when you're carrying a new life, there's just so much love and such a desire there to make good choices and to do what's best for yourself, but even more importantly for your baby. I think for a lot of moms, I think the baby's needs actually take priority and precedent, and but without informed decision making, the mom can sometimes be left to kind of pick up the pieces, like when things change and she doesn't understand why. So I think the more information we can put back into families' hands, the better.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I'm going to bring Brianna back on.
Yeah.
Talk with both of you. Awesome. So I have a question for both of you, and I'll start with Brianna. But Mandy, I'd also love to hear from you as well, your answer to this question. What do you think is the biggest issue or issues preventing the most optimal birth outcomes today?
Yeah, so I think there's a big fear of childbirth and then just lack of general social support. We don't live in communities where we have a village anymore. And so more and more women are turning to the internet to sort of take the place of that village. And so moms and aunts and cousins and other women surrounding and supporting women through pregnancy and childbirth, they turn to their providers, but unfortunately, healthcare in this country is sort of lacking in time and resources. So routine prenatal appointments aren't really very long. Women aren't given a whole lot of time to discuss their concerns and their fears related to childbirth. Then they go and they seek out information on Google or on social media, and there's a lot of information overload. Confusion about what information is good and what information isn't. And then with social media, when there are women who have traumatic birth experiences, who may have barriers to access mental health care following their traumatic births, they turn to social media and they use that as a sounding board, as a way to sort of process what they've been through. Moms that are pregnant who are looking for information, they go and they seek that out, and all they hear are scary stories about birth. So there's an actual term that we use for the fear of childbirth. It's called tocophobia. And there was actually a research study in Ireland that said that almost 14% of women can, potentially be experiencing this fear. And it has a biological effect on moms. The adrenaline is one of those hormones that's part of the fight or flight response. And when that gets activated, it pulls some of that blood supply away from the womb. It makes labor longer and more painful, which then means that those women experience more adverse outcomes, more unplanned C-sections, and have a real sense that their birth is, the outcome was traumatic. And so some of the ways that we can counteract that is by educating and informing and supporting women in any way possible. And Birthpedia is a resource for moms that's in their pocket, that gives them good qualified information to answer those questions, to release some of that fear. We also have in the app an area where you can share your birth stories. So we want to see that empowering, good, positive birth stories being shared to help with some of that fear.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so amazing, isn't it, how powerful a birth story is, just from another mom who's given birth and has had an empowering birth experience. Wouldn't you agree? Like, it's just so powerful to hear that. And so many other cultures around the world are so story based, and they do such an amazing job at having a village. It's just built into their culture. And in America, especially, unfortunately, we just don't have that village mentality. It's kind of sink or swim. It's like this big hustle mentality, and that all has carried into the way that women are giving birth, the way that most women in this country are giving birth. So, Mandy, if you could also share some of your thoughts and add anything to issues that are preventing optimal birth outcomes today.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to go off of some of what Brianna said, because I think it'll dovetail nicely with what immediately comes to my mind when you ask that question. I just love so much that she brought up that topic about fear, because I really do think it's at the core of a lot of the issues that we experience as American women when it comes to childbirth. I know for myself, like, my exposure to childbirth growing up wasn't super positive. And it kind of scared me. And I remember when I found out that I was pregnant, I was excited that my husband and I were going to be having a baby. It was something that we had planned for, but I wasn't excited about the actual birth part. And so all of the decisions that I made early on about my care and where I was going to give birth were really based on one thing: not having to feel it. Um, but making any decision from a place of fear isn't wise, right? Because then you miss out on learning about all of the other options that are available to you. So thankfully, I had some really special people pour into my life and ask me good questions that really got me thinking, and it shifted my whole mindset, and kind of transformed my experience. So I think, yes, like, releasing fear and education is a huge part of that, which Brianna did a beautiful job of hitting on. That whole thing about the hormones affecting labor, like, it's absolutely true. We see it over and over and over again. And it's really important to me that women learn that when they take my childbirth education classes. But I think something that goes hand in hand with that fear component is also informed consent, which you and I touched on a little bit during my introduction, Justine. When we have moms who are afraid already of childbirth, and they're just looking for someone to take care of them and help them get through it because it feels overwhelming, it feels terrifying. They're being told everywhere, on social media, in film, in TV shows. Like, we see it everywhere, the traumatic side or the scary side, because maybe it's more entertaining. I don't know why we have such a fascination with focusing on the negative. But we get it from a lot of different places. And so when we go somewhere looking for, like, nurture and guidance and protection, but then if that care that we're receiving isn't also intentional about making sure that we understand the things that are being offered to us, I think that's when we can see birth kind of spiral into situations, like Brianna mentioned early on with her experience in the Chicago hospital, like, women not being explained what or why something is being done to them, and unnecessary interventions leading to unplanned cesareans. And then women who made those decisions in the first place, trying to avoid what they were so afraid of, still find themselves in a traumatic, scary place. And when they're supposed to be enjoying that postpartum phase, loving on that sweet new baby, they're having to kind of pick up the pieces of their emotional health, their mental health. And yeah, and Brianna also mentioned like lack of social support. So we have like a lot of fear. We don't always have informed consent. Then we end up with birth trauma. 1 in 3 women, a study was done, like anywhere from 25 to 34% of women experience birth as traumatic. And Brianna already mentioned like 1 in 3 women experiencing a C-section. Like we're talking about low risk, healthy women finding themselves in an OR with major abdominal surgery. And I think when we look at those statistics, you would think if that was like the trend that we were experiencing, that we would have some really awesome postpartum support in place to make sure that women can come back from that. But we don't have that either. So there's just so much that can potentially get stacked on top of a new mom. And I just don't really think it's fair for her to have to navigate all of that by herself.
Yeah, it was interesting. There was a study back in 2013 that women with a moderate or high level of fear had more negative birth experience and were more affected by an unplanned cesarean section or an instrumental vaginal birth, and their 12-fold increased risk of reporting a negative birth experience. It all comes down to reversing those negative outcomes.
Which is what's so beautiful about what Birthpedia is doing, because I think a lot of times like lack of informed consent and our fear is rooted in not getting our questions answered or having questions that we don't even know where to go for the answers. I know when I was afraid of childbirth, there were a lot of questions like, what's it going to feel like? Am I strong enough? Like, how am I supposed to do this? And, the way that Birthpedia has brought together all of these birth professionals to answer these questions in an easy to understand and easy to absorb format is amazing. If I had had something like that, I probably would have figured out what the right path was for me a lot sooner in my first pregnancy.
Yeah, I agree. I'm so grateful for our birth contributors, we call them, all the birth professionals who have dedicated their time. They believe in the mission of Birthpedia. They donated their time to be interviewed. They've answered as many frequently asked questions from conception to postpartum and newborn care that we could ask. And what's beautiful is if somebody searches a question and maybe there isn't an answer, they can write to the team and we will have it answered for you. It's just a really great option, a network. Like I don't know that I don't think there's anything else out there like it, And one thing that I know is that all of the people that we've interviewed, they are working with pregnant women and birth on a daily basis. They're not just, not that there's anything wrong with pharmaceutical reps, but they're not just pharmaceutical reps writing an article on a, medical website. They are working with pregnant women, birthing women, postpartum women on a daily basis. And they all want the best, most respectful, most optimal and transformational experience a woman can have, no matter how she ends up delivering that baby. Because I think that's the thing. Like, of course, the cesarean rate is outrageous. Like, we can all agree on that. But I think what's more important is that if you are someone who is in the position and you are well informed, you are educated, you are empowered, and you still decide that a cesarean section is best for you, that is awesome. That's wonderful. And I think that's what, is so important is that, okay, so this is your situation. How can it be most optimal for you? And that you're not just plugged into a system and kind of get a run-of-the-mill experience.
Yeah, birth is not one size fits all.
Exactly. And it's meant, in its in its nature, it's meant to be transformational. So whether you have a good experience or a bad experience, it's transforming you. And so you're going to be transformed. How do you want to be transformed? And one thing I wanted I feel like we keep saying the word informed consent. And I realize that not all the listeners, they might not even realize what that is. Brianna, would you like to kind of answer and tackle that?
Yeah, sure. So informed consent is really when your provider, either your doctor or your midwife, sort of lays out all of your options without any bias or coercion. So just the facts of what the situation is, what their recommendations would be, and then leaving the decision making in the hands of you as the patient or mother and your partner. And in order to do that, you have to have all of the information. And so really where informed consent seems to be lacking these days is that, sometimes the provider has an idea of what they want and they give you a biased viewpoint of how what the outcome may be. We get a lot of moms, they're sort of coerced or feared into interventions.
Yeah, I think another term as well that is being used in the birth community is shared decision making. You and your team share in the decision making. You as the patient are coming in informed. Your team is there that you have hired and you trust to give you all of those options. And it's all presented together. And you have, I would say most of the time, you have time to make a decision.
Well, and I think the reality too is that even with interventions that for the most part have like safe outcomes or are pretty standard in certain birth environments, the reality is that every intervention carries some degree of risk. And so to only be presented with the benefits and not to also know what the potential risk factors are for you, that's not allowing you to make a fully informed decision where you have complete confidence that what you're doing is in your best interest and in the interest of your baby. So I think any informed decision making, shared decision making, like if it's not including a conversation about alternatives or potential risks, you're missing a huge piece of the pie.
Absolutely.
Sure. And how have you guys, how do you feel like social media is helpful or detrimental? I'm kind of segueing into something here, but let's just stop there for a minute. Mandy, like, how do you feel like social media is helpful or detrimental?
Yeah, so social media is such a unique animal because I think, like with most things, it can be used for so much good, but it can also be used for so much harm. And especially when most of these social media sites like Facebook and Instagram, like they have these algorithms that have the ability to like literally sift content based on your interests. So just a simple search could potentially lead you down a rabbit hole that could open up a whole world of things to you. And maybe one day it's a lot of positive things that are really helpful to you for you to know about. But then another day it might be like someone's traumatic birth story without any context or like any framework for you to understand if that's even a plausible possibility for you. But you still walk away from that with the anxiety, right? Like it kind of sparks that in you a little bit, like, oh man, what if that happened to me? But you don't really have the full story. So I think I think social media can be pretty dangerous when it comes to childbirth because of that lack of context. I know that there have been a lot of times in my own mothering journey where before I knew about something like Birthpedia, right? Like I would go to Google because something was going on with my newborn and it was the weekend and I couldn't get a hold of a pediatrician. And it's like typing symptoms and what's happening, what's going on. And I would have to sift through multiple mommy blogs and multiple like vague, generic, like medicine websites to try and combine for myself what I thought a reasonable answer was for what I was experiencing. So I think, I think there's a lot of pressure on the person kind of consuming the different websites and posts to like discern whether something is a reputable resource, whether it's quality information. And that's a lot when you're also trying to like nurse a baby and get some sleep. So I think with a resource like Birthpedia, you're cutting out all that noise because like if I open this app and I type in a question, I am only going to get an answer that's from a qualified birth professional. And not that moms out there don't have great advice. Like as an educator mom myself, like I love sharing what I've learned, but the reality is that like it's not always what's right for someone else. So I think having a qualified birth professional answering your questions when you really need them is lovely because it simplifies it. And like I said, cuts out all that noise. And I know for me, like I realized social media is creating a lot of anxiety for me. I have to filter that a little bit. And so for moms who are looking to filter some of that out to create more peace during their pregnancy or postpartum experiences, Birthpedia can be that place where they go for like rest and to get good information that isn't going to kind of spike those stress hormones.
Yeah. And there's only one of you, you can only reach so many people. And that's another thing I love about, if you ask a question and a birth professional on the app answers it, underneath that video is going to be that birth professional's website. If you want to go learn more about that professional, there's also going to be links. If they're referencing something, there's going to be links to other resources that may not be Birthpedia, where you can research more about that topic, whatever it may be. So yeah, Brianna, did you want to add anything to the social media?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm working really tirelessly for, that content portion of it, is making sure that when you're going down a rabbit hole, you're going down a good rabbit hole. Somewhere where you're going to learn and grow and feel like you have a better handle on your questions. And social media, it's a double-edged sword. I myself am taking a break right now because there is just more peace in my life without it. But new moms, there's also some really wonderful sides, and it's of building a community, connecting with people from far away. We don't live in our nuclear families as much anymore, where everyone's within the same town. So connecting people and having a place to feel supported is also important. So it's really about the balance of making sure that when you're going to get real information to help you feel more safe and secure with your pregnancy, that's coming from qualified sources. And social media, unfortunately, there's no telling what rabbit hole you're going to go down.
Absolutely. And I know I'm going to kind of segue. So I love books. Not as much as some people love books, but I loved reading, birth education books when I was pregnant. Did you guys read books when you were pregnant?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you find that your clients are still reading like books, like not audiobooks or, like?
Yeah, I think that it's still happening for sure. I mean, the childbirth ed course that I teach, like it has like a book that comes with it.
Right.
And I think for the most part, they're all reading it. I guess they could be lying to me, but I don't think that that's the case. So I do think, and we have moms all the time, like asking us for resources, wanting to know about books out there for them.
Yeah, that was the way I tricked my husband into learning more about childbirth and what to expect, was I just put it near the toilet for him every morning. And it worked. He got up and he read and he would be like, guess what I learned? I'm like, yeah, it's gonna, it's great.
I love that.
But I love reading books. I've always loved reading books. I was actually in midwifery school when I was pregnant, so I was reading like the books on childbirth. But still, there's so many great resources out there for moms, and I always encourage women to find especially good books. And there's just some really wonderful ones out there. Like Mama Natural and Ina May, Spiritual Midwifery. All of those have really empowering and good stories in them that help to sort of, like you said, fill you with positive vibes about childbirth and release some of that fear.
Yeah, absolutely. I think something gets, I'm kind of, it's like a tangent a little bit, but I think something gets ignited. Like when I think about my own story, I didn't grow up with the fear, right? But I still wasn't expecting this optimal experience, you know, like, and it was other people who, not professionals, it was other people who spoke something into me and like sparked something in me that was like, you can do this.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to do it, you can do it. Like, you were made to do it, actually. You know?
Yeah.
So it's just so powerful. The way that we talk about birth, the way that we speak to other people who are pregnant, like, it is so powerful.
Well, there's a lot of negative messaging out there. And so to counteract that with those positive birth stories is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. I do believe that people are still reading books. And I wanted to mention, Brianna, you've been working on a recommended book list.
Yes.
And we'll have that completed and it'll be in the show notes. So if you are looking for some reputable books, please go in the show notes and download that free book list guide for you. But we really wanted to focus on video at Birthpedia because we feel like, especially with social media, young moms, like, they're just scrolling and they're looking for short videos that are educational, you know, and even still, like, reels just became like huge. And it's like in 30 to 60 seconds, people are trying to like put a little course out there about stuff. And so I love that, you know, all of our frequently asked questions, we tried to keep the videos under 2 minutes for the birth professionals, just to answer the question. And if you want more information, then you can dive deeper, you know, or ask a different question.
Yeah, I think that's what's so wonderful about what Birthpedia is doing is, like, I don't think Birthpedia is trying to replace all of the other qualified resources that are out there. But you are trying to create something that speaks to the way in which we are learning in this day and age, right? If you're, yeah, like, we're on the go so much, but we still have our questions. And so I think those short form videos are such a quick way and such an easy way to get that information into a mom's hands. But you're also on the back end, like, building that content and like filling out those transcripts and having those additional resources that are relevant to the video, so that, like you said, moms can do a deeper dive into a topic that is of interest or is important to them for wherever they're at in their birth journey. And I think that that's such a gift. And yeah, like providing a book list, right? Like, reading a book requires that you have time to sit still and read it. And that's important. We should all, like, work to have that kind of space in our day. But the reality is that it doesn't always happen, or it doesn't happen until the weekend. And so having those videos, it kind of ensures that we still get what we need in the moment until we have time to kind of sit still for a little bit longer.
Sure. And I know that when I had a question, I didn't always feel like I could call and ask my midwife the question. And I know that that was probably the story I was telling myself. Like, I'm sure I could have called her, and I did many times. But there were also times that it was like, I don't feel like I should bother her with this, you know, or with my first pregnancy, when I was with the group, I had to call, I got transferred to a nurse. Sometimes I had to leave a voicemail, or when I got to talk to the nurse and ask my question, I didn't know her. she didn't know me. She doesn't know my background. She doesn't know my pregnancy. So that's another thing I love, is that at any time of day, people can ask the question, when they can't fall asleep at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning, and they're thinking of all these questions, they have a qualified resource that they can be searching the questions. That isn't Dr. Google, when you don't know what you're really finding.
Yeah. I do. I really love that Birthpedia like takes the time to kind of answer things at an entry level, like so that you don't, there isn't that intimidation factor. I definitely remember that, being like that first time mom who didn't know a lot and asking a question. And it can be so routine for the care providers. Like they're just in it day in and day out. And so for them, it may not be a big deal. They see it all the time. But for that mom that it's happening to for the first time, it's the biggest thing in their life at that moment. And so I think the way that the Birthpedia videos answer those questions as if you are a first-time mom is wonderful.
Well, and absolutely, my own birth experience sort of gave me that perspective of just the little details that you do. You start to focus on, and they're the only thing on your mind. It is the biggest deal. And I, would try and bring that into my practice. So more moms would feel comfortable asking those questions. But, the realities of the healthcare right now is that there's not a whole lot of time to ask the questions and all the questions that moms have, and they forget. And, I tell women to keep a note memo on their phone so that when questions pop up, they can think about it. But now they can just go to their app and take a look and see if there's an answer already there.
Yeah, absolutely. Briana, do you feel like an app like Birthpedia could help supplement a provider's care, or Mandy, even like a doula or birth educator's care?
Absolutely, because the women still have the questions, and if they can feel comfortable and confident with the answers, that it would be the same answer they get from their midwife, it frees up that time to discuss other topics during those visits.
Yeah, I think from my perspective as a doula or a childbirth educator, we have moms ask us questions all the time, and we do our best to give them qualified answers. But I think it's also nice to know that there's another resource that we can point them to as well. We do that a lot. I think actually see that as part of like my job description, to be able to direct mom to quality resources so that they can get the information that they need. I mean, that's part of what a doula does, right? Like we provide informational support. And I think it's kind of foolish for us to think that we would have enough hours in the day to provide all of the information in and of ourselves that a mom or a birthing family might need. And so, like you can bet that Birthpedia is going to be on the resource list that goes to our clients, because it's qualified and it's current and it's evidence-based, so that as someone providing non-medical care, I know that I'm sending them somewhere that's going to be giving them good information. Because I think that's a fear sometimes too, is, if you're directing them to a website or to like a Instagram account, and something happens to be on there that isn't sound advice, but you were the one who directed them there in the first place, like that could get kind of tricky. So I know that at least like for our business, we work pretty hard to make sure that the resources we're sharing are safe and accurate. So having something like Birthpedia, it just helps round that portion of the care that we provide, help that out.
Mm-hmm. And part of the way that Birthpedia knows that we're providing that current and qualified information is not only do we have people like Mandy and Brianna on our team who are seeing the information, and Brianna is our content manager, making sure that it is the most reputable. But we also have an advisory board, and they are also there to again, just make sure that the information is the most current and qualified and isn't just based on somebody's bias or opinion. So guys, we are going to wrap this up. Thank you so much for being on our first podcast.
It was fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
I'm sweating. Are you sweating?
A little.
Oh, so there's so much more, right? Like,
Yeah.
as we're talking, I'm like, there is so much more, but that is why there's going to be more podcasts, and we're going to be interviewing birth professionals. We're going to be interviewing the people on our advisory board. Mandy and Brianna are going to come back. We're going to be doing different series. So stay tuned, stick around. It's going to get exciting. And yeah, so just thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking your time to listen to the episode today. Something I want to do is end each episode with some type of affirmation relating to either the content that we talked about or some stage of conception, pregnancy, labor and delivery, postpartum, or newborn care. So one that I felt was fitting for today is I put all fear aside as I prepare for the birth of my baby. So if this pertains to you, you know what? Let's do this. If you, as long as you're not driving, go ahead and close your eyes. We're just going to take a couple moments to take a couple deep breaths and repeat this to ourselves. I put all fear aside as I prepare for the birth of my baby. I put all fear aside as I prepare for the birth of my baby. And as you breathe and as you put fear aside, you can begin to think, what will I replace fear with? So some suggestions might be, I replace fear with love. I replace fear with trust. I replace fear with confidence, with courage. As we all know that you can't have courage without feeling fear first. So take that with you today and in the days to come, and I'll talk to you next time.